I found the divorce papers before Emily said a single word. Just lying there, plain as day, right between my coffee mug and a piece of avocado toast. She knew I couldn't stand it. I stared at it for a long minute. Not because I didn't know what it was, but because I did, and because that was her style, so meticulous it bordered on dramatic. Emily, 34, was never one for messy endings. She liked things neat, controlled. That envelope was both her signature and her final act. A declaration that she was done and a parting jab wrapped up in passive aggression and olive oil. I didn't touch the toast. It sat there like some odd symbolic artifact of our marriage. An offering I didn't ask for, crafted by someone who hadn't listened in years. I hated avocado toast. I told her that multiple times, but she kept making it every Sunday morning like clockwork, like she was feeding a character she'd written in her head instead of the man she married, me, James, 36. She wasn't in the room when I found the papers. She was probably in the bathroom applying that new lipstick that she swore she just liked, but always seemed to wear after coming home late. Or maybe she was sitting in the car outside, engine running, rehearsing whatever explanation she had prepared if I blew up. But I didn't give her that. I picked up the envelope, opened it calmly, and started reading. She'd already filled out her side. Of course, she had. It was all typed up. No handwritten edits. No questions left unanswered on her end. I scanned it like it was a lease agreement. My name, her name, division of assets, mention of irreconcilable differences. That phrase always felt like a polite lie. We didn't have differences. We had silence. We had distance. We had growing indifference covered up with expensive sheets and dinner reservations we didn't enjoy. Emily came into the kitchen a minute later, her heels clicking softly on the tile like she thought maybe I wouldn't notice. She didn't speak, just stood there watching me like I was a bomb that might detonate if she breathed too loud. I looked up at her and nodded. Not dramatic, not angry, just a nod, like I was finally accepting something she'd already decided long ago. That silence broke the script for her. She was expecting yelling, demands, maybe even begging. That's how it always played in her head. I'm sure her leaving me unraveling and her rising above it, justified and composed, but I didn't give her that show, and it unsettled her more than I expected. The truth is, I'd known it was coming. For months, something had been off. You know that feeling when you walk into your house and it's technically the same, but it doesn't feel like yours anymore? That's how it had been. Emily had started to smell different, floral, crisper, more expensive. Her phone, once left charging on the kitchen counter, was now glued to her hip. Her texts were shorter, her answers vaguer. She laughed less around me, smiled more at nothing. And when I tried to bridge the gap, suggest a weekend away or even a night in watching our old favorite movies, she just waved it off like I was offering her leftovers. I didn't confront her. That's not who I am. Instead, I watched. I paid attention to the details. She thought I was too busy or too oblivious to notice. New passwords. Uber receipts that didn't match her calendar. A strange charge from a boutique hotel. A new contact in her phone saved as Marie that somehow always texted after midnight. I could have gone full detective. Could have hired someone or followed her or flipped the tables and made it ugly. But I didn't because somewhere deep down I already knew it wasn't about me. Emily had started writing a new story, one I wasn't part of. She was phasing me out like a character who'd served his purpose. So when she left those papers out, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was an announcement, a power move dressed as civility. But I refused to play into it. I didn't ask why. I didn't ask who. I didn't ask when. Because I'd already answered those questions on my own in the quiet space she'd left behind months ago. She hovered near the kitchen island for a second longer, like she was waiting for something, maybe for me to crack, but I didn't. I folded the papers back up, set them beside the untouched toast, and looked her in the eye. Okay, I said. Just that. And then I walked past her like I was late for something that actually mattered. She blinked, caught off guard. I could almost hear her mind recalibrating, trying to adjust to a version of events she hadn't planned for. In her version, I was supposed to make this hard. Rage, plead. But I didn't. I wouldn't. Because here's what she didn't realize, I had already grieved the end of us before she ever put it in writing. It didn't happen in some dramatic moment. It happened slowly in the little things, like the way she stopped laughing at my jokes or how she stopped reaching for my hand in public. The way she always looked distracted, like she was waiting for someone else to text back. The way she smiled at her phone and not at me. I'd been watching the credits roll for months. And by the time the envelope showed up, I was already walking out of the theater. So, no, I didn't scream. I didn't chase. I didn't demand closure. I just made a mental note, she was gone long before she packed a single bag. And maybe that was the real betrayal. Not that she left, but that she'd already been gone while I was still standing there trying to build a home. I didn't stick around. That morning, I left the kitchen before Emily could find her footing and spin the story. I went upstairs, grabbed my duffel, and started packing. Not a theatrical sweep of clothes into a suitcase. Just the essentials. A couple shirts, jeans, chargers, my running shoes. I moved slow, deliberate. There was something about being quiet in those moments that felt powerful, like I was reclaiming something. She could keep the house. I was done performing inside it. The first thing I did before even figuring out where I'd go was sever the digital ties, changed the password to my email, removed our shared calendar, canceled the Spotify family plan. Small things, sure, but each one felt like a wire being snipped. I logged out of our Netflix account just so I wouldn't get slapped in the face by her name under Who's Watching. Again, it was all part of the exit. Not dramatic, just necessary. She noticed, of course, she did. That first week, she texted me 3 times. Nothing emotional, nothing raw, just logistics. Did you take your passport? Do you want to talk about who's keeping the dining set? I didn't answer any of them. Not because I was angry. I just didn't see the point. Emily didn't deserve a front row seat to my reaction. I wasn't going to let her study it like a psychology case and use it to justify what she'd already done. The next week, I moved into a short-term rental. Minimalist apartment downtown. Gray walls, big windows, barely furnished. I found it on a site for business travelers. It came with a concierge who minded his own business and neighbors who didn't ask questions. That was the appeal. Anonymity, silence. The thing about starting over is it's not about some grand rebirth. It's more like cleaning out a drawer and realizing half the stuff in it was broken anyway. I bought new toothbrushes, a different brand of soap, and started cooking meals she would have called too plain. It was liberating. Even the way I slept changed. No more left side of the bed. No more careful movements so I wouldn't wake her. I slept in the middle now, sprawled out, breathing deep for the first time in what felt like years. But she couldn't let go as cleanly. That became obvious pretty quickly. A friend of ours, Sarah, sent me a screenshot one night. It was from Instagram, a brunch post. Emily was in the middle holding a mimosa like a trophy, surrounded by 3 of her friends. The caption was something bland, something generic, but there was a reflection in the background, a TV screen, my name in an email subject line, barely visible, probably accidental, probably not. She was still talking about me, trying to make sense of the silence I'd left behind, trying to shape the narrative in her favor. I knew her well enough to know she hated when she couldn't control the story. And silence, that was a blank page she couldn't fill. I wasn't posting cryptic quotes or sad playlists. I didn't delete her number or block her out of spite. I just didn't respond. I let her words fall into a void. That void, I learned, is where control goes to die. I think the silence started to scare her. A woman like Emily, she thrives on reactions. She needs to know she still has access to attention, to sympathy, to the last word. And when none of that came, she scrambled. I heard through the grapevine she was struggling to process things. She told one mutual friend that I was stonewalling, another that I was being cruel, but they'd seen what happened. They'd heard what she did, and no one was rushing to comfort her. When people asked where I was, the answer was simple. Gone. Gone without a fight. Gone without theatrics. Just gone. There's a certain power in not explaining yourself, in just vanishing from the storyline someone else tried to write for you. It drives people like Emily insane because without a response, there's no fuel for their version of events. No counterpoint to twist, just a quiet absence that says, I saw everything and you're not worth the argument. That apartment downtown became more than a hideout. It became a reset. I stopped checking her social media. Stopped counting how many people unfollowed her. Stopped caring who knew what. I started going for runs in the mornings, something I hadn't done in years. I'd throw on headphones, let the cold air burn through my lungs, and push until the pounding in my chest drowned everything else out. Each day, the weight lifted just a little bit more. But sometimes in the quiet moments, usually late at night, I'd catch myself staring at the ceiling, wondering how long it had all been falling apart. Not the cheating, not the paperwork, the actual unraveling. The days when we'd sit next to each other on the couch and say nothing. When her phone was more interesting than my stories, when her laughter became a stranger to me. That slow erosion of connection. That's what really killed it. She didn't leave the marriage the day she put the papers on the counter. She left a long time before that. She just didn't have the guts to say it until it was convenient. And me, I was too stubborn to admit I felt it slipping. But now, I wasn't slipping anymore. I wasn't hanging on. I wasn't clinging to a version of us that had died in silence. I was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere quiet, somewhere clean, somewhere she couldn't reach. And that, more than anything, was enough. The invitation came through a group text, which already felt outdated in a way that made it sting. Sarah and Tom, old friends, mutual friends, back when mutual meant something. They were celebrating their anniversary, hosting a dinner party at their place, the same house where we used to double date, drink too much red wine, and laugh like we had all the time in the world. I almost deleted the message, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to show up and be a talking point. I could already imagine Emily telling some carefully spun version of our breakup. How I emotionally withdrew. How she felt alone for a long time. All the clichés she probably rehearsed in her head the minute she started cheating. But something changed that week. Her name was Lauren, 30. She lived across the hall in my new building. I'd see her in the elevator sometimes, always holding a canvas tote, usually wearing black jeans and a messy bun like she wasn't trying at all, which somehow made her look more put together than anyone else. She had a kind of self-contained calm I hadn't seen in a while. Not the performative piece Emily used to put on when guests were over, but something quieter, more authentic. It started with a shared ride up the elevator. Then a nod in the hallway. Then a short conversation about the weather, of all things. Next thing I knew, we were having coffee in the corner cafe downstairs. And I was telling her things I hadn't even told my closest friends yet. There was no judgment in her eyes. No fix-it tone in her voice, just presence. So, when the dinner invite came up again a few days later, I looked across the table at Lauren, her fingers wrapped around a mug of chamomile, and I said, "Would you ever go to a dinner with someone you barely know just to make a room go silent for a second?" She smiled, half amused, half curious, and said, "Sounds like a good story." We arrived 15 minutes late on purpose. Not fashionably late, just enough to make an entrance without trying too hard. I wore a navy jacket I hadn't touched since my anniversary dinner with Emily, which felt like some kind of poetic closure. Lauren wore this dark green dress that somehow looked both casual and elegant. She didn't wear it to make a point. She wore it because it was hers. She walked into that house like she belonged there without asking permission. And when Emily saw us, her whole body told the story. She was at the far end of the room, laughing too loudly at something Tom had said. Her glass was midair, some rose swirling near the rim. She caught sight of us, and everything about her posture cracked. Just a little. A small shift in the shoulders, a stutter in the laugh, a pause too long between sentences. But she recovered quickly. Of course, she did. That's who she is. Control, always. We didn't walk toward her. We didn't need to. We floated around the room like any normal couple, shared small talk with Sarah, exchanged hellos with a few familiar faces. Nobody asked questions. That was the power of showing up calm. When you walk in without tension, you rob people of their curiosity. Lauren leaned in close when she talked to me. I rested my hand on the small of her back once, just for a second, not to show off, just to feel something real. And Emily, she kept stealing glances. Not constant, not obvious, but I felt them. The flick of her eyes, the way she shifted in her chair when Lauren laughed at something I said, the way her smile got tighter, like her face was trying to hold in the discomfort. She wanted me to look at her. She wanted that eye contact, that moment where our eyes met and we both pretended to be above it all. But I didn't give it to her. I didn't even acknowledge her. Not out of spite, out of clarity. She wasn't a part of my story anymore. We stayed just long enough for dessert. Some kind of tart with a name I couldn't pronounce, served on square plates like that somehow made it fancier. Lauren leaned in and whispered something about the texture being all wrong, and I almost choked trying not to laugh. She made things easy, not because she was trying to distract me, but because she never treated me like something broken. On the way out, I caught one last glimpse of Emily standing near the kitchen island, surrounded by people but somehow isolated. She was talking to someone, I think Sarah, but her eyes flicked to me just before we crossed the threshold. I felt the look, the one that says, "How are you already okay?" And I wanted to tell her the truth, I wasn't okay because I replaced her. I was okay because I stopped trying to fix what she broke. I didn't say goodbye. Didn't nod, didn't give her a single ounce of closure. And Lauren, she didn't ask for details, didn't dig for dirt. As we got in the car, she just said, "You handled that like someone who's already moved on." I looked over at her, calm and steady, the city lights painting soft lines across her cheek. And I said, "I think I finally have." The messages started that same night. I saw the first one just after I walked Lauren to her door. Simple stuff at first. Harmless on the surface. "Didn't expect to see you tonight." Then another, 10 minutes later. "She seems nice." I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. I sat in my apartment, glass of wine in hand, on the same couch where I'd spent countless nights trying to understand how everything with Emily had gone sideways. But that night was different. There was no obsessing, no overthinking, just a quiet sense of confirmation. She'd seen what she needed to see. The next morning, another text. "Can we meet? Just to talk." Still, I said nothing. I left her on read, which was maybe the harshest thing I could have done. But I wasn't interested in playing the old game. Emily had spent years controlling the narrative, turning her mistakes into gray areas and my reactions into overreactions. But now she was left talking to a version of me that didn't exist anymore. A day passed, then two. The messages kept coming, gradually changing tone. From vague curiosity to emotional appeals. "I just want closure. I think about us a lot. You didn't deserve how things ended." All those little lines meant to sound self-aware, like she was taking accountability. But I knew better. I knew Emily's version of remorse. It always came wrapped in nostalgia and carefully curated regret. Never full honesty. I didn't answer. And that silence, it drove her insane. That Friday, she showed up at my building. The concierge called up, said there was a woman downstairs asking for me. I asked if she was on the guest list. He said no. I told him not to buzz her in. I watched from my window as she stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the building like it might blink and let her in. It was raining, not heavily, but enough that her hair began to cling to her face in these damp little strands. She wasn't dressed for drama. No lipstick, no heels, no carefully selected coat, just a hoodie and jeans, as if she could soften everything with simplicity. She stood there for maybe 15 minutes, occasionally glancing at her phone, waiting for a text that wouldn't come, hoping maybe for some flicker of compassion. But I didn't move. I just stood there, wine glass in hand, watching the water streak down the windows like they were washing away the last traces of her. She finally left, shoulders hunched, head down. And I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel cold. I felt steady, like I'd finally taken my emotions back and didn't owe them to anyone who had mishandled them. For the next week, she was quiet. No texts, no surprise visits. I figured maybe she'd gotten the message that I wasn't a chapter she could reopen when the new ones weren't going as planned. But then came the second visit. Late night this time. I heard the knock before I even realized I'd turned the lights low. Not loud, just enough to say, "I know you're in there." I opened the door out of instinct, not expectation. And there she was, Emily. Not polished, not poised, just diminished. Her eyes were rimmed red, makeup half washed away by tears or maybe time. She looked small in the doorway, like someone who hadn't prepared for what she'd feel once she actually saw me. "Hi," she said. I didn't answer, just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, eyes darting around like she expected to see pieces of our old life still scattered around, but they weren't. Lauren had been over earlier, her tea mug still sat on the coffee table, a folded blanket on the couch, her scent in the air. And that's when Emily saw it. Saw her, not literally, but in the fingerprints of someone who now belonged here. She didn't sit. She didn't speak right away either, just stood in the center of the room, breathing like the walls were closing in. Then she finally said it. "I thought I'd feel better than this." I stayed quiet. I thought when I left it would be this freedom, but it's not. It's just quiet. Not the good kind. I nodded once, not to agree, but to acknowledge. That was all I had in me. Her eyes flicked toward the tea mug. "Is she living here?" "No," I said, finally speaking. "But she doesn't have to. She fits without trying." Emily blinked, absorbing that. I saw it hit. Saw it thread through all the things she'd been telling herself since the papers hit the counter. "I don't even know what I was doing back then," she murmured, voice low. "I kept thinking I needed something different. But I think I just needed to blow something up." "And you did," I thought. "You lit a match and walked away before the flames could reach your shoes." "I'm sorry," she added. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "It doesn't," I replied, not to be cruel, just honest. She took a few steps back, as if the gravity of the room was finally pushing her out. There was no screaming, no pleading. She didn't throw herself into my arms. She didn't beg, and I didn't break. We just stood in the final echo of something that used to be love and now wasn't. She looked at me one last time. "I miss what we had." I shook my head gently. "No, you miss who you were when you had it." That's what she couldn't forgive. Not me leaving. Not Lauren. Not even the silence. She couldn't forgive that I'd moved on without her. And that was the truth she came looking for. The last time she came by, she didn't knock. She buzzed from the front door and waited. This time I didn't answer. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because there was nothing left to offer. The story had already ended. She was just trying to rewind to a page that didn't exist anymore. Emily stayed downstairs for a while. I watched from my window again, but the feeling was different now. Not anger, not satisfaction, just detachment. I felt like I was watching a stranger, someone I used to know wearing the shape of someone I used to love. She stood with her arms crossed, like the cold might forgive her if she hugged herself tightly enough. After maybe 20 minutes, she finally turned and left. Her footsteps slow, like maybe she thought I'd still come running, but I didn't. I poured another cup of coffee, answered some emails, texted Lauren. She didn't come back after that. Instead, Emily turned to the one place where she could still try to shape things, other people. She told friends her version of what happened. Not lies exactly, just repackaged truths, the kind that make her sound brave instead of reckless. It was a mutual drifting. We were on different pages. He changed. But people knew. They'd seen the way she looked that night at the dinner party. They'd seen the way I walked out with someone else and didn't look back. And no amount of rephrasing could hide that. I heard from Sarah eventually. She said Emily was trying to be more reflective lately, that she talked a lot about regret. I thanked her for telling me, but I didn't ask for details. I wasn't curious. Emily's process wasn't mine to carry. In her house, the one we used to share, the one with the creaky stair and the broken dimmer in the hallway, I imagine the silence must feel different now. Not peaceful like mine. Not fresh, just empty, hollow, like the echoes of a life that stopped mid-sentence. I picture her scrolling through social media late at night, thumb hovering over photos she doesn't double-tap anymore. Sometimes I think she probably lingers on one in particular, taken a few weeks after the dinner. Me and Lauren, sitting at a little table on a rooftop bar just as the sun was going down. Nothing dramatic. Nothing posed. She's laughing at something I just said, her hand resting lightly over mine. There's a glow to it, a softness. Not the spotlight kind, just a kind of peace you can't fake. The caption wasn't clever or bitter or even aimed at anyone. It just said, right where I'm supposed to be. And that probably did more damage than any angry voicemail or bitter text ever could because it was true. Emily never responded to it. Never liked it. But I know she saw it. And I think for the first time she understood what she'd really lost. Not just me, but the version of herself that used to deserve me. That's the thing people don't talk about in these stories. Everyone focuses on the betrayal, the confrontation, the mess. But what really cuts deep is the realization that you let something good rot. That you traded steady hands for cheap thrills. That the person who once waited for you to come home now doesn't care if you do. I still see her name sometimes. Mutual friends tagging her in birthday posts or sharing memories that pop up from a time when we were still smiling in group photos. I don't mute her. I don't block her. I just scroll past. Not bitter. Not nostalgic. Just done. And me, I sleep through the night now. I leave my phone on the counter. I don't jump when it buzzes. Lauren and I cook dinner most nights. Nothing fancy, just simple, easy meals where we laugh about the grocery list and argue over who gets the last piece of garlic bread. We don't perform for anyone. There's no audience, just two people learning how to be present without carrying the weight of someone else's ghosts. Sometimes late at night, I'll walk out onto the balcony with a drink in hand, looking out at the quiet city, the lights flickering in a rhythm that feels like a pulse. I breathe in deep. No heaviness in my chest. No what-ifs clinging to the back of my mind. Just peace. Not the kind that comes after chaos. The kind that comes when you finally stop chasing the person who left and start living like they never defined you in the first place. That's the real ending. The door that doesn't open again and the life waiting on the other side of it.